You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 7, Episode 6. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Hey friend, thank you so much for joining this week. Today I am so excited about my guest. She is actually a huge part of the story behind Feathers and why we're even here. If you ever wanted to hear that entire story behind why I call this podcast Feathers and the backstory, you can actually go back to episode 000 and hear all of that. But if you haven't, we'll do a little recap today. I mean, we're 7 seasons in, so it won't hurt to review that a little for our new friends. All right, so if you don't know Holley Gerth, I am so honored to introduce you to her today. Holley is a best-selling author of several books, including You're Already Amazing, and she is one of the sweetest, most encouraging people you will ever meet. She quite literally wrote greeting cards for Dayspring back in the day. She's also a writer with Dayspring's site Encourage, so you might have heard of her from there. Today I had the chance to share with her how she fits into the story of Feathers, and she gets to tell all of us the amazing story that God has been writing with her family and talk about what it means to be fierce-hearted from her latest book. I'm so happy to bring today's conversation to you, so let's go ahead and get started. Well, hey, Holley, and welcome to Feathers today.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to finally talk to you. We were just chatting and said it had been too long since we had talked. So you and I actually did some, what do we call it, consultation, something, back in 2013?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know, but that conversation is actually the entire, well, not the entire reason, a really big reason that this podcast exists, and it's named what it is. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's
okay.
So fun.
Well, I have to share then the quick story for you.
Okay, I would love to hear it.
Because I think you'll like to hear this. So I tell this entire story in the first episode of this whole podcast, but we're in season 7 of this podcast, so I think some of our listeners probably haven't gone back to hear that first one. So I'm not going to take all 30 minutes. I'll give you the short version. So I think it must have been in a Loom, I guess 2012, maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you spoke or we met or something, but in the spring of 2013, I had decided that I wanted to rebrand, and that's when, you and I connected at the beginning of 2013, and we did some consultation about, what I wanted my blog to be about. Yeah. This is when I had my personal, it was permission to peruse for people who have been listening, following for a long time, and you guys at the conference had really pushed to go to personal branding. So I did Amy J. Bennett and, trying to figure out what all of that was about. So part of what we do, or what you did, was had me put a Pinterest board together with all the things that it just kind of felt like what I wanted the brand to be about or the blog to be about. And one of the things that I pinned, I did not even do this consciously, was a lot of wings and feathers. And you had interpreted that to mean that I wanted to encourage people and lift others up.
Yes.
Yeah. So I rebranded with the kind of that, and that is what I want to do. I even now, I just love encouraging people. And so that was a theme. And then I went to a Loom again, and at that whole year, even though I had rebranded and stuff, it just really didn't feel like, I just felt like I was in a striving mode with my blog and just trying to give people what they wanted and make people happy and all this. So I went into a Loom and I was just really in a terrible kind of emotional place. I was like, should I just give all of this up? What should I do? And God just really used that weekend to speak to me and just pour some life into me. And at the last night, while they were doing worship, they had an artist, 10 artists that were paintings, I guess, and they were giving them away randomly. Well, I happened to be one of the ones to get it, and the painting was a picture of a feather, and,
wow.
And it had the word replenish underneath it. And so for me, that was just really, it just harkened. Immediately I thought of our time together, and it was just encouragement that I needed to keep on with my blog, but really it was all about, and what I took away from the weekend, it was really all about living a life from Him, out of the overflow.
Yes.
Well, fast forward up to 2014, we ended up adopting, and it got really hard. He is he was an 8-year-old boy from foster care, and the first couple of weeks were just super hard, and I was kind of questioning, like whether we had done the right thing and all of this. And so I went on a walk and I asked God for a feather because that had kind of like shown up in the past. Mm-hmm. I was like, can you just give me a feather? I just would know that like we had done the right thing and all of this. And sure enough, the Holy Spirit just really spoke like the direction in my neighborhood, which I like turn right here, go forward here. I found 3 feathers.
Wow.
Like right in the middle of my very non-tree
yes.
neighborhood. And then it comes to find out that actually, and I think it was before, is that our son had been gathering feathers the entire time he was in foster care.
That's so beautiful.
And then after all of that, I was sharing this on my blog, and other people started finding feathers, and I mean, I was keeping track, and there was like hundreds of them. It was really crazy. Wow. Yeah. So
I love that.
Yeah, so anyway, that was a couple months. That's the short version. It was kind of long, but the short version. But a couple months later, I just really felt like God wanted me to start this podcast, and just other stories of where people had taken like leaps of faith and had really trusted God, and He had covered them, through the hard things.
Yes.
And of course, feathers was, just really part of that imagery.
Yes.
Tied together the whole blogging thing, and anyway. So, yeah, it really started when you and I talked 4.5 years ago.
Oh, I love that, Amy.
Yes.
Such a beautiful story.
Well, it's just like a full circle moment to have you on the podcast now. So we could go home now and be happy.
Yep.
No, but I'm so excited to have you. And it's been amazing to see what, God is always at work, what God has been doing in your life as well. So for people that don't know you, I mean, we just jumped right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Well, I am an author and encourager, married to Mark, my college sweetheart. We've been married 17 years, and we have an unexpected family story. We couldn't have kiddos of our own and went through about a decade of infertility and ended up meeting a young woman named Lavelle who basically aged out of the foster system, and met her when she was 20, and she became our daughter, got married, and we just became grandparents 3 weeks and 3 days ago.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
That's going on. Thank you. Yeah. So it's been really fun.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I actually want to jump into that story a little bit more. So, we're going to talk today about your new book. You have a new book out called Fiercehearted, and definitely want to talk about that. But this is a story that you share in the book. So tell us, this really started, you mentioned you couldn't have kiddos of your own, so you really started with infertility. What was that? Talk about that season of life.
I did. Mark and I got married, and we thought, well, it's been a few years, we're going to have kids, and it'll be easy and simple, and just like all our friends are, going down that path, and that was not the case for us. We just faced month after month and then year after year of closed doors and not being pregnant and loss. And it was a hard time because it feels like when you want a baby or anything else that seems good, it's just confusing. Like, God, why are you answering this prayer for everyone else? Or are we doing something wrong and we don't understand? And so it was a difficult season of life.
And, that really still is not a prayer that God has answered for you, but you've definitely, I think, God has redeemed those moments and that prayer. I love what God really settled in your heart several years later about being a mother. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, He did. So over time, God, in His great tenderness and compassion toward us, just started showing me that I didn't have to have physical kids to be a mom. And one time in particular, He took me to Genesis, where Eve is called the mother of all living. And I realized that all women bring life into the world in some way. And for a lot of them, that's through physical kids, but sometimes it's not, and so I felt like for me, He was saying, your books are going to be your babies. And so I just started focusing more on birthing words and being a mama in that way. And the folks in my life were so sweet about that. My small group even threw me a book shower instead of a baby shower when, You're Already Amazing came out. And so I thought, well, maybe this is the path that he has for us. And yet there was still like this longing in my heart. Like, I don't feel like that story is totally finished yet. And one night when I was watching a documentary, I saw a bunch of kids who aged out of the foster system. And basically at 18, they're told, have a nice life. And it was one of those moments where I sat on the edge of the couch and I thought, that's not okay. Like, who's going to walk them down the aisle? Who's going to help them figure out their careers? You know, who's going to rock their babies? And that has stuck with me. So people would say, have you ever thought about adopting? And I would say, well, if we do, we're going to adopt a 20-year-old. And finally, a close friend of mine said, well, do you know about Saving Grace? And it turned out that there was a facility being built in our town for girls who age out of the foster system or would otherwise be homeless. And so time went by. I was really busy doing other things and then got invited to a banquet at Saving Grace. And that night we met Lavelle. So it was a gradual process, and I don't want to gloss over it. If someone's listening and is in that season, I'm not saying it shouldn't hurt or be hard, just that there's hope.
Absolutely. And I love too that, wasn't your word of the year love?
It was. It was. And it was the
crazy.
week of my birthday. So on a Tuesday, I felt like I said, your word for this year is love. And then on Thursday, we met Lavelle, which her name is spelled like the word love with LLE on the end.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that timing was so close to each other.
Yes,
I thought it had been like, I was imagining, you got your word of the year in January and this was like May or something.
No, 2 days later.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yes.
That's so amazing. So let's pause for a moment and think about women that might be listening that are really struggling through infertility and miscarriage, and it may or may not end in adoption for them. What kind of hope would you give to those ladies listening?
Well, I think we can experience, just like we can be a mom in different ways, we can experience infertility in different ways. So maybe someone's listening and it's not that she's waiting on a physical child, but maybe she's waiting on a dream, that everyone else seems to be getting but her. Or maybe she's single and wants to be married. Like, I think as women, we can feel barren in any area of our life where something we desire hasn't come to pass. And so I think it applies to other needs too, and so to those women, I would say it's okay to be honest with God about where you are and what you're feeling, to just say, like, I'm sad, I'm mad, I don't understand, I'm confused, I'm hurt, I'm jealous of other people in my life that you're granting this to. And infertility really broke me of my need to be okay all the time. I'd kind of been one of those people that when someone was like, how are you doing? I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. And infertility brought me to the place where that wasn't an option anymore. And I specifically remember being with some girls from my small group, and I was just like, I'm not okay, and I thought, okay, I'm about to be in big trouble with God. Like, they're going to tell me what I'm doing wrong. And instead they're like, yeah, of course you're not, you just had a miscarriage, been going through years of infertility. Like, of course you're not okay. And we love you in that place. And so I would say that my hope started from being honest with God and then daring to be honest with some people I trusted, because we need that support and that grace. And sometimes we're not going to be able to hope for ourselves, and we need people to step in and do that for us.
That is so good. Community is so important, especially in stuff like that. It's so hard, though, to admit those things, especially when the people that are close to you might even be the people that you are envious of.
Yes. I had a lot of people in my life get pregnant because I was in that season, you're in your mid-20s, and like my best friend got pregnant. Both of my sister-in-laws got pregnant. It was like everybody was getting pregnant but me. And so I think knowing too that it's okay for that to be hard, and to even dare being honest with those people about that. Like when my best friend got pregnant, we had this long conversation about how it was hard for both of us. It was hard for me because she had something I wanted, and it was hard for her because she said, I feel like I just stole your boyfriend, there's this thing you wanted for so long. Yeah. And I have it, and I don't understand why you don't. And we ended up writing an article together called The Pregnancy Test about walking through that. But again, I think it's it can feel like we're protecting the people around us by not sharing our grief or not sharing even our jealousy and frustration. But I think being honest and just saying, this is where I am today. And we can't do that with everyone, unfortunately. Some people are not going to understand, and some people are not going to receive it well. And so using discernment, but I think it's important to even have one person in our lives that we can do that. And if there's not one, like, I'm a big believer in counseling. I just went yesterday. I will go again as much as I need to. So that may be the place where we start. But I think saying, okay, I'm going to own where I am, and I'm going to let people into it, can be really healing.
And for the people that are on the opposite side of that, like your friend who knows that it's painful situation, what do you recommend for people like that or walking beside those that are struggling?
I would say try not to give easy answers. You know, a lot of time when someone's hurting, we want to say something that will make them feel better. And the reality is there's nothing you can say that will make that person feel better. The most healing thing is simply to hear, wow, that's really hard. And I want you to know that I'm going to walk through this with you for as long as it takes. And it's okay that you're mad today. That doesn't make you a bad person or a bad Christian. You know, just continuing to speak encouragement and reassurance and remind them of their true identity, because when you go through a struggle, it's really tempting to make that your identity. Like, I'm infertile. No, I'm a beloved daughter of God who is walking through infertility, you know, and reminding people of who they really are outside their circumstances, I think can be so powerful. So those were some of the things that were helpful for me. The things were not helpful to hear were, oh, I'm sure you're going to have a baby. You know, I heard that a lot. Or have you ever thought about, you know, whatever it is, adoption or this treatment or whatever it is, we've thought about it. We've Googled it 500 times. You know, we don't need information. We need encouragement and support. And so not giving advice unless you're specifically asked for it, I think is important. And then just not dismissing feelings like, well, at least you have another kid, or you've got plenty of time, or, well, at least you have a great husband, you know, not dismissing the emotion, but instead just saying, I will be in this emotion with you.
That's so good. And that don't give too much information or don't give information. I'm such an information junkie. That's like my default, like, cause I read about something and then I want to share it and I think I'm being helpful, but no. Sometimes it's not helpful.
Yeah, and sometimes that is. And knowing the person too, you know, if you know your friend and information is comforting to her, then go for it. But just, I would say, make sure you know that about that person or that they've specifically asked, you know? Right.
Well, it's just, I'm glad how things have turned out, the redemption with Lavelle. It's just amazing that in the book, what you talk about is how many similarities that there are between you and your family. Share a couple of those. I think they're pretty amazing.
Yes. It turns out Lavelle loves to write also. She has a great blog. She wrote an amazing post yesterday about being a mama, and it's lavellegirthmyers.com. So that was fun to discover. And she loves to speak. So she and I have actually shared our story together a few times. And we didn't know that when we first met. She had written some like in journals and things in high school, but when life got really hard, all of that just went underground because she was in survival mode. So it's been really beautiful to see those creative gifts come out of her again and for her to be growing and thriving in those. So that's really fun. And then she married a guy named David, and he's an auditor. And my dad is an auditor, and they are cut from the same cloth. Like, they get really excited at holidays talking about like fraud and spreadsheets and
things that I don't do.
Yes, they have like their own little language. And so it's just really fun, like how both of them just fit right into our family, you know, like they were always supposed to be there.
Well, it's amazing, even with our son, how that happens. Like, I was just looking at a picture yesterday of my son and my biological daughter, and I was like, you would just never know that they are not related. They look so much alike, and just how much he actually acts a lot like my husband. They both have ADHD, and they both have a lot of the same personality, and it's really crazy. It's been amazing that my husband has helped me understand him, because they're so much alike. And amazingly, because of that, through my son, I've been able to understand my husband more and really understand what he what he endures and has gone through and stuff like that. So in a lot of ways, it's been very healing.
Yes. Yes.
So in your new book, Fiercehearted, you actually, well, let's talk about the baby, grandbaby.
Baby.
Tell me all the amazingness about it, because I hear that grandparenthood is amazing.
Yes, it's so fun. So we found out last fall that she was pregnant, and she decided to name Ellie. We're nicknaming her Ellie, but her full name is Eula Ellen. So Eula is my dad's mom's name, and they are actually together today, hanging out. And then Ellen is the middle name of all the women on my mom's side of the family. So like my middle name is Ellen, my mom's middle name is Ellen, all the way back for generations and generations. So that was really fun that she picked family names for little Ellie, and I got to be there when she was born, which was an extraordinary experience. So I was in the room, and when she made her appearance, I was on one side of Lavelle and David was on the other, and I just kept saying, "You're strong, you're brave, you can do this." And it was such like a miraculous experience, and I feel like such a gift that's about as close to giving birth as you can get, to be right there for it. And so there's just been so many things that have gotten to be a part of my story that I thought probably would never be through Lavelle. And God is in the details, because Ellie came on the exact day that we made everything official with Lavelle 3 years ago. She was born on August 28th, and in our family, we call that Gerth Day, and we celebrate it every year like a birthday, and that's when Ellie came.
Oh my gosh. It gives me chills. That's crazy. It's crazy to me how God, I mean, people say that God doesn't pay attention to like dates and numbers and all that stuff, but he so does.
He totally does. Totally.
He totally does. It's so cool how he does that.
Yeah.
Well, what I was saying about the book is you actually close out the book and I guess the epilogue, and your prayer for Ellie is for her to be fierce-hearted. Mm-hmm. And so I would love for you to talk about, because that's a new phrase. What does that mean to you? And talk about the book, what that's about.
Yeah. Fierce-hearted to me is a woman who lives with her heart open and chooses to live fully and love bravely. And the book actually started in fall of 2015. I had gone through a season where I'd just been like crazy busy and traveling more than was probably good for me. And that triggered my depression and anxiety, something I've struggled with off and on for most of my life. And then I got hurt by someone I cared about. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. Like, I'm shutting down my heart. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to let people in. I don't want to encourage anyone. Like, no more. I'm going to live on a desert island. And I had to get on a plane that day to go see my publisher, because I actually, for the first time, had missed the deadline. And we were getting together to talk about what was next. And they were so kind to me, but I was going up there, and so I was sitting on this plane in the dark, and I felt like Jesus just gently asking, what are you going to do? You know, are you going to shut down your heart, or are you going to keep it open? And so I had nothing else with me except my Kindle. So I pulled out my little Kindle and sat there in the dark and like typed with my thumbs basically and wrote out what is now the Fiercehearted manifesto in the book. And it says things like, a fierce-hearted woman looks life in the face and says, you can't beat me, knows love is risk, but reaches out anyway, understands kindness, takes real courage. And I cried. I probably scared the person next to me. You know, everyone else is eating peanuts, and I'm having this like major moment in my life. And I knew that I couldn't keep going forward in my own strength and living and loving in the way I tried to do on my own. I was at the end of myself, and Jesus said, okay, great. I'm going to show you a better way. And so I wrote Fiercehearted over the next almost a year. And I would just go to a coffee shop in the morning, and I would sit down and I would get really honest with Jesus about where I was at. And so it feels like a completely different kind of book than I've ever written before. Before I'd written more as a counselor and life coach. And this is just like me being really honest in the presence of Jesus. So it's very vulnerable, and also, I believe, life-changing. It changed my life and set me free in some ways I really needed. And I'm just trusting it's going to do the same for other women. And I think more than any other time, we are called to be fierce-hearted because we live in a world that every day we face reasons to shut down our hearts. Every day we could choose to say, our world is too divided. It's too hard to get out there. I don't feel like loving anymore. I'm going to just not do that. So I think it was a journey for me personally, but also a call for this generation of women that Jesus is asking us to step up and be fierce-hearted.
Oh my goodness, I have so many follow-up questions. I was going to say, I have read all your other books, and this is a very different Holley Gerth book, and I love it. I love all your books. They're so encouraging, and this one I felt like a little bit like the veil was pulled back. And I loved it. And it feels like, it feels like what you're saying is like writing the book itself. Cause I'm wondering, you're in this place where you're kind of at the end of your rope, the end of yourself. You want to get done. And it sounds like the writing itself was what was healing. I mean, digging into these topics with Jesus really, and writing them down was really part of the healing process. What would you say kind of what got you to that place, and what, other than writing it down, like what was the substance of what really walked you out of that season?
Well, yeah, I think just being too busy and overcommitted and not taking care of my heart and getting hurt got me there. And then the writing was absolutely healing. That's kind of, writing's always been that place for me, that I can go to and be like, okay, Jesus and I are going to work through this. So that was a big part of it. And in addition to that, I was like, I have to rework every area of my life. And I went to counseling, and again, like I did with the infertility, I got really honest with my tribe of friends and said, here's where I'm at, what I'm going through, what I'm battling with. Like, will you fight beside me for my own heart? And I changed the way I slept. I changed the way I ate, the way I exercised, like everything in my life. I talked to my doctor about the physical side of depression and anxiety. It was just kind of a complete overhaul. And I say rework, but that's probably the wrong word because it didn't feel like work. It felt like Jesus, like giving me this season of restoration, and just gently showing me what needed to be different in my life for me to be in a better place. And I'm so grateful for that. But I would say the main thing that changed me was the book. Like, I'm a different person than I was when I wrote the first page. And I'm so thankful for that. And so I look at this book, and yeah, I was the one typing on the keys, but in so many ways it doesn't feel mine, it just feels like the power of it is not me in any way. It's Jesus and his love for his daughters and his relentless desire to set us free and to rescue us from ourselves, first by making us his, but then rescuing us over and over and over again. So I'm so grateful that he does that for us.
Yes, and you say over and over, it is such a journey. It's like, well, you get through one thing and then there's the next thing, and you do see victory, but it definitely is more like the marathon, right, instead of the sprint.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and I feel like you kind of get to these, I don't want to say, I don't even know what the words are because I'm just thinking through this, but like kind of stations levels where you're like, oh, so I've got like victory in this thing, and then you kind of take another lap or something. And you go through another season.
Yes, I think so. Because now he has me working through something new, writing another book. So I think I love the verse in Psalms that says they go from strength to strength until each appears before God in Zion. And I think that's how it is in our lives, that like we are continually moving onward and upward with Jesus, even though to us, a lot of times it feels like we're tumbling back and laying in the bottom of the valley, with a chocolate wrapper in our hand and a coffee cup. But yeah, that's the process of our lives. And it's hard. It's so hard to be in those places. But I think it's also a place where there's a special kind of intimacy with God that is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So on this podcast specifically, we talk a lot about, taking a leap of faith, being brave, being obedient to whatever God is calling you to next. I feel like that's part of being fierce-hearted. Mm-hmm. What would you say? What do you think you're a counselor, right? Or have counseled a lot of women, I should say. What do you have a sense of? I'm just wondering, have you seen what are some things that really trip women up when it comes to being obedient and kind of taking these leaps of faith?
I would say fear, of course, is a big one. Just saying, I'm not sure what's going to happen, or I don't have all the answers, so I'm going to wait until I feel like I do. And I think that God calls us to do it afraid, to just take the first step, and then he directs us from there. And so waiting to be ready, telling ourselves we're not enough, or we need more education or experience or this or that before we can even take one step, I think that can really trip us up. And then I think in our culture today, believing that it has to be a big thing, that we can't be brave in our everyday, ordinary lives.
Well, I think just even like you were talking about, like talking to your friends, that is a big leap of faith. I mean, sometimes it's just being honest with people around you.
Yes. I think that's definitely vulnerability, I think, is one of the most courageous things that we can do. I'm actually reading Brene Brown's new book, and she had a quote in there that said, without vulnerability, there is no courage. And that really struck me because she said, think of all the acts of courage you've ever experienced or have witnessed in others. Can you think of a single one that didn't require some kind of vulnerability? And she said, as a researcher who has talked to thousands of women, I can't. And when I thought about it in my own life, I was like, no, I can't either, But I think we overlook that. We think that to be brave and courageous means to like have our armor on and not let anyone in and be like the Lone Ranger. But I think especially for women, that leaps of faith look like saying, I'm going to open my heart to you and I'm going to dare to show up as I am.
I think that is so true, being vulnerable. And I think a lot of times even it's not just being vulnerable with others around you, but even being vulnerable with God. And just really being honest with what's really happening. I've seen that over and over again, just talking to women through this podcast of they really began to see some breakthrough when they really got honest with God about how they were feeling.
Yes.
And you would think it's like, intellectually you think, oh, God knows everything. So, of course he knows these feelings, but somehow we try to hide them. I don't know how.
Yeah, I think so too. I feel like I'm in a season of learning that because I would like share how I felt with God, but then by the end of the prayer, I'd try to be like, but I know that, everything's going to work out and I'm okay. And lately I've just been like saying, God, I'm afraid. Like, that's all. Like leaving it there, and or God, just I'm tired today and leaving it there. Like letting it just lay before him and let him do the fixing instead of feeling like, okay, I can dare to be honest with God, but then I have to figure it out by the end of the prayer or I'm going to be in trouble.
Well, I think there's just maybe we're like, maybe mixing up the whole thing, and I actually just posted this on Instagram today about like taking captive your thoughts, like always replacing them, with the truth, and like having these negative emotions and feelings are bad. Like you have to just always, I don't know. I do feel like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do. So I think too that it's a leap of faith to feel what we feel, and just say, this is what it is today. I'm sad or I'm mad or I'm tired. And that doesn't mean I'm bad. It just means I'm human. My counselor and I were talking about that a lot yesterday because I told her, I don't know how to stop being so hard on myself. That really trips me up. And so we are talking about that and the specific thoughts I wrestle with. And instead of trying to make them go away, just saying, this is okay. It just means I'm human living in a fallen, broken world. And these feelings are part of it. And these thoughts are part of it too. And I don't have to let them stay forever, but I can sit with them and see what they have to tell me and let Jesus, be there in that place with me.
Mm-hmm. So good. So I have not jumped in. I've seen a counselor a couple times. But clearly that's something that you're a proponent of and continuing to do. What recommendations do you have for people to find a good counselor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would always go to people you trust and ask for recommendations, because I think the heart of a counselor is really important. So for example, close friends, your church, and then meet with the counselor. It's okay to meet with them and ask, how do you approach counseling? And how do you think about what helps people grow, and because there's different types of counseling, a lot of different types. And so the person you talk to may not be the best fit. It's kind of like dating in a way,
Right,
and
right.
so it's okay to like say, I'm not sure I found the right counselor yet, to talk to several different people, and just know that it's hard and scary at first. But when I was a counselor, I always had so much respect for my clients. I learned so much from them. And so, no, you're going into a safe place with someone whose job is to be relentlessly for you, And so, yeah, I love counseling. I would rather go to the counselor than get a manicure or pedicure any day.
Oh, really?
It's like spa for your soul. Yes.
Spa for your soul. That should be a
Yes.
counselor services. Spas for your soul.
They need to come up with a place where you can get counseling and a pedicure at the same time. That would be perfect.
Yes. The counselor could be doing your nails.
Yeah.
Or go to the next room.
Yes.
That's so funny. Okay, Holley. Well, I've just so enjoyed our conversation and so glad we got to catch up. If people want to connect with you online, just to connect and then get your book and all, where do they go to do that?
I would love for them to stop by holleygerth.com or fiercehearted.com. And they can find out more about the books and sign up for free encouraging emails. And there's all kinds of goodies on there.
All right. We will send them over there. Go do it, people. Well, thanks again so much for spending some time with me today, Holley.
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, don't you love Holley Gerth too? You can tell she was a counselor because she's just someone you could talk with for a long time and feel so comfortable. A couple things I'm walking away with from this conversation. The first is from when she was talking about her struggles with infertility and how that was so difficult, but really that can be applied to any of us waiting on anything from God. And you're seeing other people get the dream you have, and yet you haven't gotten it yet. And I just look back at Holley's story and see how it unfolded. And, you just have to look at God in that moment and say, okay, I trust you. I get it. You're a better storyteller than I am, and you care, and you've got this. So maybe if you are waiting, take a deep breath today and say, God, I trust you, and I trust your ways, and I trust your timing. They're not like mine, but I know you will work this out for my good. He is just so awesome. The other thing I'm taking away is how important it is for us all, sometimes to come to a point where we just need things to be different in our lives. We hit that wall when we haven't been taking care of our hearts. And for some of us, we're going to need some counseling and just to really talk through some of these things with someone trusted. For some of us, it's reworking our physical selves and being careful about our nutrition and our exercise and ensuring we're not sabotaging ourselves from the physical side of things. That mind to body connection is just incredible, how God created our bodies. That's definitely something I've been diving into lately. And some of us need to find some community or maybe some hobbies that will help us process some of the things that we're going through. And I think it's just good to remember that we're not alone in times like that we all struggle sometimes. We're all human, and we all have to take good care of our hearts so we can really live fierce-hearted. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that like I did. If you want show notes, you can go to abidingministries.net and be sure to follow us over at Abiding Ministries on Instagram and on Facebook. I am actually still doing live Facebook videos every morning, short devotionals somewhere around 7:30 a.m. Eastern. I'm just catching up with everyone, so I would love to see you there. All right, I think that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week on Feathers.